Hello, everyone. My name is Brenda Sinclair. I'm 30 years old, and last week, my father called me crying. In my entire life, I had never heard Philip Sinclair cry, not once. 2 years ago, I was the one on the phone in tears. I had just been told I had stage 3 breast cancer, and my father responded with one sentence I will never forget. 6 months of chemotherapy, 36 hospital visits, not one visit from my family. They were busy planning my brother Ethan's $95,000 wedding at the Drake Hotel in Chicago. Now my father needs me. And my answer was exactly 7 words. Before I tell you what they were, if this story speaks to you, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if it truly resonates. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let me take you back 2 years. Back to the day everything split into before and after. At the time, I was a senior graphic designer at Brooks & Lane Creative in downtown Chicago. The kind of mid-sized agency with exposed brick walls, too many plants, and an espresso machine that cost more than my first car. I loved my job. I was good at it. I had worked my way up from intern to senior designer in 5 years. No shortcuts, no handouts, no family connections. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. There was a monstera plant by the window I'd somehow kept alive for 3 years, which felt like a personal achievement. My life had rhythm. Coffee at 6:30, gym 3 times a week, dinner with my best friend Olivia Hart every Thursday. That Wednesday started like any other. I was deep in a campaign for a fintech client with an impossible deadline. Slack notifications kept lighting up my screen every 30 seconds. I was in that rare creative flow where everything clicks. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something, instinct maybe, made me answer. Miss Sinclair, this is Northwestern Memorial Hospital. We have your biopsy results. I remember the exact temperature of my coffee. Lukewarm. I'd forgotten about it an hour earlier. I remember the way the late afternoon light hit the glass walls of the conference room, and I remember thinking, biopsy results should not come with that tone. The results are in, the nurse continued. Dr. Melissa Grant would like to see you tomorrow morning. Can you come in at 8 a.m.? My coffee sat untouched for the rest of the day. I barely tasted dinner that night, because everyone knows they don't call you in for good news. The next morning, Dr. Grant didn't waste time. Stage 3 breast cancer, she said gently. Professional. Controlled. The tumor is aggressive. We need to begin treatment immediately. I sat there in that sterile office. Diplomas on the wall, a fake plant in the corner. And it felt like I floated out of my own body. Like I was watching some other woman in her late 20s, still in her work blazer, hearing words that didn't belong to her life. Brenda, Dr. Grant said softly. I blinked. Sorry, I'm here, I said quickly, realizing I'd drifted somewhere far away. Dr. Grant's expression softened. Do you have someone who can drive you home? For a second, I considered calling Olivia. But it wasn't even 9 in the morning, and she was likely already deep into her shift at the hospital. My coworkers were friendly, but not the kind of people you call when your life just detonates. And without really thinking, I said, I'll call my dad. You need to understand something about my family. My father, Philip Sinclair, wasn't loud or explosive. He didn't slam doors or throw things. His authority was quieter than that. Steady, immovable. When he spoke, everyone adjusted. His opinions became the weather system we all learned to live under. Growing up, we didn't argue with Dad. We didn't challenge him. We adapted. And even after years of feeling like I ranked second in my own home, I still reached for him in that moment. Because when your world collapses, you call your father. That's what daughters do. I walked out of the oncology office, sat down on a bench in the hallway, and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly, it took me 3 tries to press his name. He picked up on the second ring. "Brenda, what is it? I'm in the middle of something." Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand the Sinclair hierarchy. Ethan is 2 years younger than me, but you wouldn't know it by the way we were raised. Ethan was the son. I was extra. When it came time for college, my father wrote a full tuition check for Ethan without hesitation. I was told expensive schools weren't practical for girls, and I graduated with $92,000 in student loans from a state university. In our house, sons were seen as investments. Daughters were expected to be self-sufficient. Ethan was the legacy. I was the contingency plan. When Ethan landed his first job, my father hosted a celebration dinner. When I was promoted to senior designer, my mother sent a single "congrats" text with a heart emoji. Ethan had just gotten engaged to Lauren Whitfield. Sweet, polished, impeccably put together Lauren. The wedding was scheduled for October, 4 months away, at the Drake Hotel in downtown Chicago. It had consumed my family completely. Every conversation revolved around guest lists. Every Sunday dinner turned into menu tastings and floral debates. My mother had a Pinterest board that might as well have been a second full-time job. "Dad," I said into the phone, my voice already breaking. "I just came from the doctor. I have cancer. Stage 3. Silence. I could hear him breathing. In the background, my mother asked who was calling. "Dad, did you hear me?" Another pause. Then he exhaled slowly. "About that doctor's appointment," he began carefully. "We're going to need to talk about this later." But he didn't say later. He said something else. Around that time, I started screenshotting our messages. I told myself it was because chemo fog was real, and I didn't want to forget details. But maybe some part of me already understood I would need proof. "Dad," I repeated, slower this time, like maybe I hadn't been clear. "I have stage 3 breast cancer. The doctor says I need to start chemotherapy immediately. I'm really scared." I was crying openly now, tears sliding down my face in a hospital hallway filled with strangers. A nurse walked past and gave me a look I'll never forget, sympathy mixed with recognition. I turned toward the wall, pressing the phone tighter to my ear, waiting for the words every daughter wants to hear. "Come home. We'll handle this together. You're not alone." Instead, there was silence. 5 seconds. 10. Then his voice shifted, firmer now. "Brenda, listen. Your mother and I can't deal with this right now." I stopped breathing. "Ethan's wedding is in 4 months. There's a lot going on. We can't take something like this on at the moment." Something like this. "Dad, you've always been strong," he continued, already closing the door. "You're independent. You'll figure it out." His tone hardened the way it always did when the conversation was over. "I have to go. Ethan and Lauren are coming by to finalize the venue deposit." And just like that, the line went dead. I sat on that bench for 45 minutes. Doctors walked by, nurses, families holding hands. No one stopped. I was just another woman in a hospital hallway, living through the kind of day that divides your life into before and after. I wanted to call him back. I wanted to scream, "Your daughter could be dying!" I wanted to say, "A wedding lasts 1 day. Cancer lasts every single day you're fighting to survive." But I didn't. Instead, I opened my phone. 8:47 a.m., Duration, 2 minutes, 31 seconds. I took a screenshot and saved it to a folder I named Family. That was the last time I called my father for 2 years. On the first day of chemotherapy, I drove myself to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The infusion center was on the 4th floor, a wide, quiet room with reclining chairs arranged in a semicircle. Each one had its own IV pole and a small adjustable television. It looked like a spa imagined by someone who had only ever read about spas in medical textbooks. I checked in, signed paperwork, sat down in chair number 7. A nurse named Carla, kind eyes, silver hair pulled into a low bun, accessed my port and started the infusion. "First time?" she asked gently. I nodded. "It's normal to be nervous," she said. "Most people bring someone with them." I glanced around. Chair 3, a woman whose husband held her hand the entire time, whispering to her as medication flowed through clear tubing into her veins. Chair 5, a teenage boy while his mother read aloud from a paperback novel, her voice steady. Chair 9, an older man whose daughter had brought homemade soup in a thermos. Chair 7, me, alone. I texted my mother. "Starting chemo today. I'm scared." She replied 6 hours later. By then, I was home, curled on my bathroom floor, blinds drawn, nausea hitting harder than I'd imagined. "Hang in there, sweetheart. I'm at the florist with Lauren picking centerpieces. Peonies or roses? What do you think?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then I took a screenshot, saved it, and typed back, "Roses are nice." I didn't tell her I had just spent 40 minutes dry heaving. I didn't tell her I had to pull over twice driving home because my vision blurred and I thought I might pass out. I didn't tell her anything real. What was the point? I hadn't seen Olivia Hart in years. During my 3rd chemo session, I reconnected with her. She was now a nurse practitioner running one of the hospital's support groups, the kind funded by grants about holistic patient care and emotional outcomes. I had ignored the flyers taped near the elevators until she approached me directly. "You're always alone," she said, sitting down in the empty chair beside mine. Her red hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail, and she had the kind of steady eye contact that made dishonesty feel pointless. "I'm fine," I replied automatically. She smiled, not pitying, just warm. "I didn't ask if you were fine," she said. "I asked why you're always alone." There's a difference. I should have brushed her off, given her a polite half answer. But I was 3 rounds into chemo. My hair was starting to thin, and I hadn't had a real conversation in weeks. "My family's busy," I said. And then, because something about Olivia made the truth feel safe, "My brother's wedding." Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "When's the wedding?" "October." "And your last chemo session?" "November." She nodded slowly. "You know we keep visitor logs here," she said. "Every patient, every visit, who came, when they came. It's mostly for security, but some people request copies for their records." I didn't understand why she was telling me that. Not yet, but I remembered it. 3 days later, I requested my first copy. Ethan's wedding was set for October 15th at the Drake Hotel. I was between chemo cycles at the time, that strange in-between window where the nausea eased, but the exhaustion still lived in your bones. I wasn't planning to attend. I hadn't been asked to be in the wedding party, not a bridesmaid, not even a reader, just absent. But part of me still thought, maybe I would go. Maybe I would slip into the back row at the Drake Hotel, sit quietly, and just watch my family from a distance. Then my father called, one of his rare, deliberate calls. "Brenda," he began, his tone measured, "about the wedding. Your mother and I have been talking." Hope flickered in my chest, stupid, stubborn hope. "We think it would be best if you didn't attend." And just like that, it died. "You understand," he continued in that patient voice he used when explaining something obvious. "You look unwell. You've lost weight, and your hair—" He cleared his throat. "It's Ethan's special day. We don't want anything to overshadow it." Anything, meaning me. Overshadow meaning reminding guests that while they were debating centerpieces and seating charts, their daughter was fighting to stay alive. "I understand," I said. And I did. I understood exactly who I was in that family. The wedding happened without me. I saw the photos online. My mother's post gathered hundreds of likes, while I lay in bed recovering from my 4th chemo cycle. My father, sharp in a tailored suit, smiling like nothing in his world was broken. My mother in champagne silk dabbing at her eyes. Ethan and Lauren glowing beneath crystal chandeliers, surrounded by nearly 200 guests who had no idea the groom even had a sister. The caption read, "The happiest day of our family's life." I took a screenshot, saved it to the folder. Then I deleted the app and didn't open it again for 6 months. Some images don't need a replay. 3 weeks after the wedding, the medical bills started arriving. Insurance covered a portion, thank God for my company's PPO plan, but a portion isn't the same as all. After deductibles, co-pays, and medications labeled non-formulary, I owed $52,000. $52,000. That was the price of staying alive. I sold my car, canceled subscriptions, stopped buying anything that wasn't discounted. And when that still wasn't enough, I did something I swore I would never do again. I asked my father for help. "Dad, I'm in trouble. The medical bills are more than I can manage. Could I borrow some money? I'll pay you back." I stared at that message for 20 minutes before hitting send. My finger hovered over the screen like it was wired to explosives. But desperation erases pride. His reply came 2 hours later. "Your mother and I just finished paying for Ethan's wedding. We don't have extra funds right now. Have you considered a personal loan? Your credit should qualify you." I read it 3 times, waiting for something else. A sorry, and "I wish we could." Even a "we love you." Nothing came. $52,000. My survival cost that much. And the same family who had proudly spent $95,000 on Ethan's wedding couldn't spare a dollar. I took another screenshot, saved it. Then I applied for a personal loan at 15% interest. I'd be paying it off for years, but at least I'd be alive to make the payments. At least, I hoped I would. The worst night came after round 4. Dr. Grant had warned me that chemo compounds, each cycle heavier than the last. But no one can prepare you for lying on your bathroom floor at 2 a.m., shaking so violently your teeth chatter while your body tries to purge everything inside it. That was the night my hair came out. Not slowly, not gently, all at once. I woke up to a pillow covered in strands, the same hair my mother used to braid before school, the same hair she once brushed while humming in the kitchen. I crawled to the toilet and vomited until there was nothing left, and then I kept vomiting. At 2:47 a.m., I called my mother. 8 rings, voicemail. I called again, voicemail, again. At 3:15 a.m., I texted Olivia. "I think I need help." She showed up 40 minutes later, still wearing hospital scrubs from a late shift. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer platitudes. She just sat on the bathroom floor with me, gently holding back what was left of my hair, and stayed until sunrise. At 10:23 a.m., my mother called back. "Sweetheart, you called last night? My phone was on silent. Lauren and I were at the spa. Post-wedding stress relief. You know how it is." A small pause. "What did you need?" I looked toward the kitchen. Olivia was there, quietly making tea in my tiny Lincoln Park apartment. Then I looked at the bald patches on my head in the bathroom. "Nothing, Mom," I said softly. "It's fine." "Oh, good," she said with relief. "Well, call any time. Love you." She hung up before I could answer. I took a screenshot of the call log. And that was the moment I fully understood what family meant and what it didn't. If you've ever been abandoned by the people who were supposed to love you the most, if you've ever been told you're strong enough when what you really needed was someone to show up, then you know this feeling. If that's you, drop a "me too" in the comments. You're not alone. Now, let's get back to the story. 2 years later, I was cancer-free. The day Dr. Melissa Grant looked at my scans and said, "No evidence of disease," I didn't react right away. "Brenda," she said gently, "you did it." I walked out of Northwestern Memorial Hospital and cried alone in the parking garage for nearly an hour. They weren't sad tears. They weren't even happy tears. They were release. 2 years of bracing for impact, 2 years of living scan to scan, and finally, I could breathe. A lot had changed in those 2 years. I'd been promoted, first to art director, then leading larger client campaigns. It turns out facing your own mortality gives you a kind of clarity that corporate leadership recognizes. Daniel Brooks, the founder of Brooks & Lane Creative, kept my role secure during treatment. Let me work remotely when I could. Never once made me feel disposable. When I thanked him, he simply said, "You're talented. Talent is worth waiting for." I moved out of my small Lincoln Park apartment and bought a condo in Chicago's Gold Coast. It wasn't enormous, but it had wide windows overlooking Lake Michigan and enough sunlight for my Monstera plant, which somehow survived everything, just like I did. On my 1-year remission anniversary, I bought myself a navy cashmere scarf. It was the first expensive thing I'd purchased that wasn't tied to a hospital invoice. Olivia and I were closer than ever. Thursday dinners were still sacred, but now she felt less like a friend and more like the sister I never truly had. As for my family, I hadn't seen them in 2 years. We exchanged surface-level messages, a Happy New Year, a birthday emoji. Nothing real, nothing vulnerable. I had made peace with that, or at least I'd built a quiet truce. I had a life now, a stable, hard-earned, self-built life. And then my father called. It was a Thursday evening. My first instinct was to let it go to voicemail, the way I'd learned to let a lot of things go. But something made me answer. "Hello?" "Brenda." His voice was different, thinner, unsteady. Philip Sinclair had never sounded uncertain in his life. "I need to see you." No, "How are you?" No, "It's been too long." No apology, just, "I need." "What's going on?" I asked. There was a long pause. I could faintly hear my mother's voice in the background. "I've been diagnosed with something," he said finally. Another pause. "Parkinson's disease. Early stage, they say, but..." He trailed off. I stood there in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, watching the salmon begin to overcook. "I need my family around me," he continued. "There's a dinner Sunday at the house in Naperville. Your mother, Ethan, Lauren. I want you there. We need to talk about the future. The future. As if I hadn't spent the last 2 years building one without him. Okay, I heard myself say. I'll be there. After I hung up, I stood in the quiet kitchen for a long moment, and that's when I realized something. In that entire conversation, the first real one we'd had in 2 years, he never once asked how I was. He didn't even know if I had survived. For the next 2 days, I moved between dread and something darker. Curiosity. Parkinson's disease. I researched it the way I research everything now. Early-stage Parkinson's isn't immediate death. It's slower than that. Tremors, stiffness, gradual loss of control. Eventually, difficulty walking, speaking, swallowing. It requires long-term care. It requires patience. It requires someone willing to rearrange their entire life. And suddenly, I understood why my father had called. Not because he missed me. Not because he regretted what he'd done. Because he needed something. And I was the logical solution. The unmarried daughter. The daughter without children. The daughter who had always been expected to bend. I called Olivia that night. "You're going?" she asked carefully. "I need to hear what they're asking for," I said, "and I need them to look me in the eye when they ask." There was a pause. "I'm not going to let them manipulate me," I added. "Not this time." My fingers brushed the navy cashmere scarf hanging near my door, the one I bought to celebrate remission. A reminder that I had survived something bigger than this. I need to face them," I said. "Does that make sense?" Olivia was quiet for a moment. "Bring the folder," she said gently. "You mean the screenshots?" "The screenshots, the visitor logs, all of it. Not to use," she clarified, "but to remind yourself of the truth if they try to rewrite it." I hadn't opened that folder in months. That night, I did. I sat on my bed and scrolled through 2 years of proof. Text messages, call logs, hospital records with my name printed at the top, and an empty column where visitors should have been. 36 visits, 0 names. It was amazing how clearly love, or the absence of it, can be documented. Sunday arrived faster than I expected. I dressed carefully, not to impress, to armor. Black slacks, a cream silk blouse, the cashmere scarf draped just so. I looked successful. I looked healthy. I looked like a woman who had built something without them. Right before I left, Olivia texted, "Remember, you don't owe them anything. Not a single thing." The drive to Naperville took about 40 minutes. My parents' house looked exactly the same. White colonial, black shutters, 3 stories, 5 bedrooms, a lawn so perfectly trimmed it barely looked real. It was the house I grew up in, and never truly belonged to. The house where I learned that love came with conditions. I sat in my car for 5 minutes, watching the warm light glow through the dining room windows. I could see silhouettes moving inside. My mother probably arranging plates, polishing silver, preparing the stage. The illusion of the perfect family. My phone buzzed again. Olivia. "You survived cancer. You can survive dinner." She wasn't wrong. I had faced down death. What was a family meal compared to that? I grabbed my purse, inside it my phone and the folder that held everything, and walked up the brick path. The doorbell chimed the same 3 notes it had my entire childhood. My mother opened the door. Her face held a mixture I couldn't quite decode. Relief, guilt, something rehearsed. "Brenda," she said softly, pulling me into a hug before I could decide whether I wanted one. She smelled like her usual perfume, the same scent she wore to my high school graduation, to Ethan's wedding, to every milestone that somehow never centered me. "You look wonderful," she said quickly. "Come in." I stepped inside and braced myself. The dining room hadn't changed in years. The long mahogany table that seated 12, even though we were only 5. The crystal chandelier my grandmother supposedly brought from Europe. The framed family photos lining the wall. That's when I noticed something. The timeline of photos stopped around my 18th birthday. After that, Ethan's college graduation, Ethan's engagement party, Ethan's wedding. And me? Frozen at 18. Awkward in a prom dress, smiling at a camera that never really saw me. "Brenda." Ethan stood up from the table, arms already open. Golden boy, as always. Behind him, Lauren remained seated, one hand resting on her 5-month pregnant belly. The next generation of favoritism already on its way. "Ethan," I said, accepting his hug stiffly. He felt softer than I remembered, like someone who had never been required to fight for his place. "You look great," he said. "Really?" His eyes flicked briefly to my hair, shorter now, grown back uneven but strong. At least he had the decency not to comment. And then I saw my father. Philip Sinclair sat at the head of the table, exactly where he had always sat. But something had shifted. He looked smaller, older. His left hand trembled against the white tablecloth, a subtle shaking he tried to steady but couldn't fully control. When his eyes met mine, I saw something I had never seen before. Fear. "Sit down, Brenda," he said. His voice still carried authority, but there were cracks in it now. "We have a lot to discuss." I took the chair across from Ethan, my back straight, my purse resting at my feet. Inside it, my phone waited. The trap was set. I just wasn't sure yet who it would close on. My mother served dinner: rack of lamb, roasted potatoes, green beans almondine, the same menu she prepared for every important family occasion. We ate mostly in silence. The scrape of silverware against china filled the space where real conversation should have been. When the plates were cleared, my father pushed back his chair and stood, or tried to. His legs hesitated. He gripped the edge of the table to steady himself before finding balance. "I'll get straight to it," he said. Even now, his tone carried the weight of a man who had spent 6 decades being obeyed. "You all know about my diagnosis, early-stage Parkinson's. The doctors say it will progress. I'll require long-term assistance." He let that sentence hang in the air. My mother stared at her folded hands. Ethan shifted in his seat. Lauren rubbed her stomach gently. "We've discussed this as a family," my father continued. I almost laughed. When exactly had this been discussed? Without me. "And we believe the best solution is for someone to move back home to help manage my care." His eyes settled on me. "Brenda, you're the obvious choice." Obvious. The word landed like a slap. Not preferred, not best suited. Obvious. The unmarried daughter, the child without children, the one whose life was apparently flexible. "You work remotely most of the time," he went on. "You don't have a family of your own. I've had your old room prepared. It's time you came home and contributed." Contributed. As if I had been idle for 2 years, as if surviving cancer didn't count as effort. Ethan nodded, avoiding my eyes. "It makes sense, Bren," he said. "With the baby coming and my workload, you understand." I noticed what he didn't say. He didn't say he wanted to help. He said Lauren would need him. Convenient. Lauren remained quiet, one hand resting on her stomach, but her gaze stayed on me. There was something in it. Not quite sympathy. Recognition. like she had seen this script before and knew how it usually ended. "You have a responsibility to this family," my mother added softly, that gentle tone she used when she wanted compliance without confrontation. "Your father needs you." "I've been working 60-hour weeks," Ethan added quickly. "And with the baby, I can't split myself in two." I looked at my father, at his trembling hand, at the expectation written across his face. "Think about what you're asking," I said evenly. "We're not asking," he replied, his voice sharpening. "We're telling you what needs to happen. You're the daughter. This is what daughters do." This is what daughters do. The words filled the room like smoke. For a moment, I felt the old instinct, the reflex to shrink, to smooth things over, to make myself useful. But that version of me had died on a bathroom floor 2 years ago. She died alone, with unanswered calls and a phone full of silence. "Before I answer," I said calmly, even though my heart was pounding, "I need to ask you something." My father blinked. No one asked Philip Sinclair questions. They answered him. "When was the last time you asked how I was doing?" Silence. "When was the last time," I continued, "you asked if I was even still alive?" The room tightened. My mother's smile froze. Ethan suddenly found his water glass fascinating. Lauren leaned back slightly, like she instinctively knew something was about to detonate. "What are you talking about?" my father asked, but there was less force in his voice now. "I'm asking something very simple," I said. "You say I have a responsibility to this family, but when I was sick, really sick, fighting for my life, where was this family?" "Brenda, that's not," my mother began. "No," I interrupted. "I want an answer." My voice didn't rise. I had spent 2 years learning how to stay calm while everything inside me was breaking. "Dad, do you even know if I'm still in remission? Do you know what my last scan showed? Do you know anything about my health?" Silence. This one sharper than before. "You're sitting here," I continued evenly, "looking at me like I'm perfectly fine. Am I wrong?" My father frowned. "What do you mean, perfectly fine? You said you had cancer." "I did," I said. "I had stage 3 breast cancer." I let the words sit between us. "I went through 6 months of chemotherapy. I lost my hair. I lost nearly 20 pounds. I paid $52,000 out of pocket because you told me you couldn't help." My father's mouth opened, closed. For the first time in my life, Philip Sinclair had no response. "And here's the part you need to understand," I said quietly. I reached for my purse, slowly, deliberately. My hands were steady now. "I'm cancer-free. 2 years in remission." I met his eyes. "But you didn't know that, did you?" He said nothing. "You didn't know because you never asked." I pulled out my phone. "You never asked because you didn't care." My father's face drained of color. My mother began to cry, the silent kind, tears sliding down without a scene. "That's not fair," she whispered. "We were dealing with the wedding." "And the wedding?" I repeated softly. "Ethan's wedding. Important enough to spend $95,000 on. Important enough to brag about to relatives. But my cancer wasn't important enough to visit," I said. "Not once." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't know it was that serious," he muttered. "I called Dad the day I was diagnosed," I said. "I was crying. I told him it was stage 3. I looked directly at my father. "And you said, and I quote, 'We can't deal with this right now. Your brother's wedding is coming up.'" "I didn't," he began. "Yes," I said calmly. You did. I unlocked my phone and opened the folder. Then I placed it face up on the polished mahogany table. Would you like to see the messages where you told me to take out a personal loan because you had just paid for the wedding? I swiped. Or the call log from 2:47 a.m. when Mom didn't answer because she was at the spa? I scrolled again. Or maybe you'd like to see my hospital visitor records. The document filled the screen, date after date, time after time, and one column repeating the same word. None. 36 hospital visits, I said. 36 chemo sessions. 0 visitors. The room went completely still. Lauren's hand slipped from her stomach. She stared at the phone, then at Ethan, then at my parents. Something shifted behind her eyes. My mother reached toward the screen, then pulled her hand back. She started, but there was nothing left to say. I slid the phone toward the center of the table. You can look. I'm not hiding anything. My mother picked it up first. Her hands trembled as she scrolled, month after month. My name printed at the top of each page, and that empty column. Visitors. None. I don't understand, she whispered. Why didn't you tell us how serious it was? I did, I said. I pulled up the screenshots. Here's where I sent you my chemo schedule. Here's where you asked about peonies versus roses. Swipe. Here's where I asked Dad for help paying medical bills. Here's where he suggested a loan. Swipe. Here's where I called you 23 times in 6 months. You answered twice. Ethan took the phone from her. His face turned gray as he scrolled. Lauren leaned over his shoulder, jaw tightening. This can't be right, Ethan said weakly. It's right, I replied. Every screenshot is timestamped. Every hospital record is official documentation. This isn't my interpretation, Ethan. This is what happened. I looked at my father. He hadn't moved. His trembling hand was pressed flat against the table, as if he were bracing himself against something bigger than Parkinson's. I don't need an apology, I said quietly. I just need you to remember this. Remember it when you ask me what I'm going to do next. Because when the people who are supposed to protect you don't show up, you learn to protect yourself. You keep records. You keep receipts. Because feelings can be denied, but documentation can't. The silence that followed was heavier than anything that had come before. My mother was crying openly now. Not the controlled tears from earlier. Something raw. Mascara streaked down my mother's cheeks as she kept whispering, I didn't know. Brenda, I didn't know. You knew, I said quietly. We need to focus on the present. I'm sick, Brenda. I need help. We need to move forward. I almost laughed. Forward? I repeated. You want to move forward? Yes. Whatever happened before. He waved his trembling hand dismissively, as if my cancer had been a scheduling inconvenience. We have to deal with what's happening now. I need a caregiver. You're my daughter. Lauren cleared her throat. It was the first sound she had made in nearly 20 minutes. Philip, she said carefully, did you know about all of this? The hospital visits? The money she asked for? My father didn't answer. He knew, Ethan said quietly, staring at the screenshot where my father had suggested a loan. His voice held something close to horror. Dad, you knew. It was complicated, my father snapped. The wedding, the timing, there were considerations. Considerations. I stood up slowly, smoothing my blouse. There were considerations, I repeated. I slipped my phone back into my purse. My mother reached for my hand. Brenda, please, don't do this. We're family. There it was, the word, family. I let it sit in the air. Let me tell you what family means, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Family shows up. Family answers the phone at 2:47 in the morning when someone is too sick to stand. Family offers to help with medical bills instead of spending $95,000 on a party. Family visits their daughter in the hospital, at least once. My mother's face crumpled. Ethan stared at the table. I spent 6 months fighting for my life, I continued. 6 months of poison in my veins. 6 months of vomiting and fear and watching my hair fall out. I looked at each of them in turn. And where was my family? They were tasting wedding cakes, debating floral arrangements, finalizing seating charts. Brenda, my father tried. No! The word came out sharp. You don't get to Brenda me anymore. I am not your backup plan. I am not the spare child you call when it's convenient. I am not the daughter you ignore until you need something. I picked up my purse, adjusted my scarf, my dignity. You have a son, I said, looking directly at my father. A son you paid $95,000 to celebrate. A son you've never once asked to sacrifice anything. I turned to Ethan. Why don't you ask him to move back home? Ethan's head snapped up. I can't. I have responsibilities. So did I replied. I had a career. I had a life. I had cancer. And I managed all of it alone because you were too busy. I walked toward the door, heels clicking against hardwood. Behind me, I heard something I had never heard before. Brenda, please. His voice broke. I turned. Philip Sinclair was crying. In 30 years, I had never seen him cry. Not when his mother died, not when Ethan broke his arm as a kid. Never. But now tears streamed down his face, his trembling hand brushing uselessly at them. I'm sorry, he choked. I handled it wrong. I know that. But I'm scared. I'm scared of what's coming. I need you. Please, you're my daughter. For a second, just one dangerous second, I felt it. That old pull, the aching need to be chosen, to be wanted, to finally be enough. The little girl inside me who had spent her whole life trying to earn her father's approval stirred. But that girl didn't live here anymore. She had survived cancer alone. She had rebuilt her life from the ground up. She didn't need Philip Sinclair's validation to exist. Dad, I said quietly, steady and clear. I hear that you're scared. I do. But there's something you need to hear. I stepped closer, close enough that he couldn't misread my face. 2 years ago, I called you crying. I told you I had stage 3 cancer. I told you I was terrified. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. And do you remember what you said? Silence. You said, we can't deal with this right now. The words settled into the room like falling snow. So here's my answer. I smiled. Not bitter, not cruel, just calm. I can't deal with this right now. 7 words. The same 7 words he gave me. My mother gasped. Ethan's jaw dropped. My father stared at me, tears still streaming down his face as the meaning sank in. I turned and walked toward the door. I didn't run. I walked past the framed photos that stopped at my 18th birthday, past the chandelier, past the polished mahogany table, past the illusion. My mother reached for me and then let her hand fall when I didn't slow down. Brenda, Ethan called. Wait! I didn't. I stepped outside onto the brick pathway. The cool evening air hit my face like oxygen. Behind me, the door opened again. Footsteps hurried toward the driveway. Please, my mother cried. "Don't do this! We're your family! We love you!" I stopped at my car door and turned. "Mom," I said gently, "family doesn't leave you alone to die. And love isn't something you offer only when you need something back." Her face crumpled. For a brief moment, I felt something. Not guilt. Grief. For the mother she could have been. For the relationship we might have had. "Goodbye, Mom." I got into my car, started the engine, adjusted the mirror. In the rear-view reflection, I saw them. My mother standing in the driveway, crying. My father in the doorway, supported by Ethan. Lauren behind them, one hand on her stomach, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I pulled onto the tree-lined street, and I didn't look back. Not once. The cashmere scarf rested softly against my neck. The road ahead was open, and for the first time in 30 years, I could breathe. I was free. A week later, my mother called. I answered, not because I owed her anything, but because curiosity lingers longer than anger. "Brenda," she said, her voice thinner, older somehow. "I wanted to tell you what's been happening." "I'm listening." "Ethan had to take a leave of absence from work. Your father's symptoms are progressing faster than expected. He needs help every day now. Meals, medication, getting dressed." I stayed quiet. "Ethan is handling it," she continued. "He didn't have much choice. With Lauren pregnant, they can't afford full-time care, and your father refuses to consider assisted living." Another pause. "He missed a major project at work. There's talk he may lose the promotion he was counting on." I thought about Ethan, the golden child who had never been asked to sacrifice, the son who had a $95,000 wedding funded without hesitation, the son who had nodded while our father expected me to give up everything. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it, not for Ethan specifically, but for the collision between expectation and reality. "Lauren is stressed," my mother added. "They're arguing. She said something." "What did she say?" A long sigh. "She said she's starting to understand why you left." I let that settle. Lauren, the quiet observer, was beginning to see the pattern. "Thank you for telling me," I said. There was hesitation on the other end of the line. Will you come back to help?" "No," I replied gently. "But I hope Ethan figures it out." And I ended the call. 3 weeks after that dinner, my mother sent me a text. Just one message. But it was different from anything she had ever written before. "Brenda, I've been thinking a lot. I owe you an apology. A real one, not an excuse. I should have protected you when you were sick. I should have stood up to your father. I should have been there. I wasn't, and I have to live with that. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see what we did, and I'm sorry." I read it 3 times. This was new. My mother had never taken personal responsibility for anything in her life. She spoke in passive constructions. Things happened, situations unfolded, mistakes were made. But here she was saying, "I should have, I wasn't, I'm sorry." I didn't respond immediately. I sat with it for 2 days, turning the words over in my mind like a smooth stone. On the 3rd day, I wrote back. "I appreciate you saying that. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I hear you." Her reply came almost instantly. "That's okay. Whenever you're ready. Or never. Whatever you need. Whatever you need." 7 words. So different from the 7 words I had been given 2 years earlier. I showed Olivia the messages over dinner that Thursday. She read them slowly, then looked up at me. "How do you feel?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe cautiously hopeful, but very cautious." "That's healthy," she said, squeezing my hand. "You don't owe her forgiveness, but you're allowed to accept an apology." I nodded. "I'm learning." 2 weeks later, a letter arrived, handwritten, the script uneven, shaky, the handwriting of a man whose hands were no longer reliable. The envelope had my name spelled carefully across the front. Brenda Sinclair. I almost didn't open it. I carried it in my purse for 3 days, taking it out, putting it back. Finally, Olivia said gently, "Just read it. The waiting is worse than whatever's inside." She was right. I opened it on a quiet Thursday evening, sitting alone in my condo, a glass of wine on the coffee table, my monstera plant stretching toward the window like it always had. "Dear Brenda, I am not good at this, at apologizing, at admitting when I was wrong. Your mother says it's pride. Maybe she's right. I failed you. Not because I didn't understand what was happening, but because I made a choice. I chose your brother's comfort over your survival. That is something I will carry for the rest of my life. I am not asking you to come back. I am not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve either. I only wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. I see the daughter I pushed away, and I see the woman she became without me. You are stronger than I ever was. I didn't lose you to cancer. I lost you because I wasn't the father you needed. I am sorry." Those words are not enough, but they are all I have. Your father, if you will still allow me that title, Philip. The letters wavered across the page, each word a small fight against tremors that would only worsen with time. I folded the paper carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. The next evening, Olivia came over. I handed her the letter, the first person I trusted enough to witness something this complicated. She read it slowly, then set it on the coffee table between us. "How do you feel?" I tucked my feet beneath me on the couch. "Sad," I said finally. "For him, for what he's losing. And maybe, just a little, for what we both had already lost long before Parkinson's ever entered the picture. For what we could have had," I said slowly. "But not guilty." I let that settle. I used to feel guilty for everything. For not being impressive enough, agreeable enough, easy enough. For not being the daughter he seemed to want. But the last 2 years changed something in me. "What did you learn?" Olivia asked. "That some people will never love you the way you need," I said. "No matter how hard you try. And that's not your failure. It's theirs." I turned my wine glass between my fingers. You can't pour yourself empty, trying to fill a cup with a hole in the bottom. Olivia smiled, her eyes bright. "That's wisdom." "I earned it the hard way," I said softly. "I'm not rushing forgiveness. Maybe I'll get there one day, maybe I won't. But I'm not going to force it just because he's sick, or because it would make everyone else more comfortable." She nodded. "And if his condition gets worse?" she asked carefully. "Then I'll deal with it when it happens," I replied. "But I'm not setting myself on fire to keep someone else warm." I glanced at the letter resting on the table. "That's my boundary," I said, "and I'm allowed to have it." "Yes," Olivia said firmly. "You absolutely are." 6 months later, I was still cancer-free. At my last appointment, Dr. Grant used the word thriving. I almost laughed when she said it. I had spent so many years bracing for impact that thriving felt too bold. But maybe she was right. I had been promoted again. Now creative director at Brooks and Lane Creative, with an office overlooking downtown Chicago and Lake Michigan shimmering in the distance. My Monstera plant had made the move with me, stretching wider in better light. I hired 2 junior designers and discovered something surprising. I loved mentoring. I loved helping someone else navigate the professional terrain I had once crossed alone. I was dating someone. His name was Miles. He taught high school history, had kind eyes, and a terrible sense of humor. He knew about the cancer, about the dinner, about everything. He didn't try to fix me. He just showed up, consistently, the way love is supposed to. Olivia and I still had dinner every Thursday. She was seeing someone now, too, a surgeon named Elena who laughed at all her bad jokes. We were building something, a chosen family. My mother texted every few weeks, short messages. Thinking of you, hope you're well. Sometimes I responded. Sometimes I didn't. We weren't close. Maybe we never would be. But we were something. A cautious reconstruction. My father's Parkinson's progressed. He finally agreed to a part-time caregiver, funded from the retirement savings he once guarded so fiercely. Ethan visited twice a week now. Duty, perhaps. But sometimes duty is the only version of love a family knows how to offer. I hadn't seen them since that night, and I was at peace with that. If there is one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. Your worth is not measured by who shows up for you. For most of my life, I believed love was something you earned. If I worked harder, achieved more, stayed quieter, needed less, maybe then I would be enough. Maybe then I would be prioritized. Cancer stripped that illusion away. When I was at my weakest, I learned a painful truth. Some people will not stand beside you, no matter how much you have stood beside them. Not because you are unworthy, not because you failed, but because they lack the capacity to give what you need. And that realization, as devastating as it was, set me free. I learned that boundaries are not cruelty. They are self-respect. I learned that forgiveness is not an obligation. It is a personal choice, and it cannot be rushed to ease someone else's discomfort. I learned that love is not words spoken at dinner tables. It is presence at hospital beds. Most importantly, I learned that you are allowed to build a life beyond the people who hurt you. You are allowed to choose peace. You are allowed to walk away without hatred and without guilt. Strength is not surviving alone. Strength is surviving and then refusing to abandon yourself ever again. If you have ever felt unseen, unheard, or unchosen, I want you to know this. You are not too much. You were simply asking the wrong people. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever had to choose your own peace over someone else's expectations, I hope you know you're not alone. If you believe boundaries are a form of self-respect, take a moment to like this video. It helps this message reach someone who might need it tonight. If parts of my story felt familiar, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to say no to protect yourself? Have you ever realized that love without action isn't love at all? I read more of your comments than you think. And if you value stories about strength, accountability, and rebuilding after betrayal, consider subscribing to the channel. This is a space for real conversations about family, resilience, and learning to choose yourself. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Sometimes the bravest thing you can say isn't, "I forgive you." Sometimes it's simply, I deserve better.